You must be Mr. Cooper, the ER nurse said, glancing up from her tablet as I approached the reception desk. Your wife's in treatment room 3. She's been asking for you. Yes, I'm Ryan Cooper, I confirmed, heart still racing from the panicked drive to the hospital after receiving a call that my wife, Melissa, had been in a car accident. Is she okay? The nurse smiled reassuringly. Minor injuries, nothing serious. Though she was quite confused when she arrived, kept asking for someone named James, the concussions likely causing some disorientation. James, I repeated, the name unfamiliar. I don't know any James. A slight frown crossed the nurse's face as she double-checked her tablet. That's strange. When she was admitted, she gave her emergency contact as James Cooper, husband. The number didn't connect, so we found yours in her phone. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My name isn't James, it's Ryan. It's always been Ryan. There must be some mistake, I insisted, even as a cold dread began spreading through my chest. We've been married for 4 years. My name is Ryan. The nurse looked uncomfortable now. Of course, I apologize for the confusion. As I mentioned, she has a concussion. She gestured toward the treatment area. She's right through there. I walked toward room 3 on legs that suddenly felt disconnected from my body, my mind racing with possibilities. A mistake, confusion from the accident, some kind of joke. As I reached for the door handle, a man rushing down the hallway called out, "Excuse me, I'm looking for Melissa Cooper. I'm her husband, James." I turned slowly, my hand frozen on the door, to face a stranger claiming to be married to my wife. How is it possible for your entire reality to collapse in the space of 5 seconds? The next few moments passed in surreal slow motion. The man, James, stopped abruptly upon seeing me, confusion evident on his face. "Who are you?" we asked simultaneously. The nurse who had been following him glanced between us with growing alarm. "Mr. Cooper, this gentleman says he's also Mrs. Cooper's husband." "That's impossible," I stated flatly, though the cold dread spreading through my body suggested otherwise. "I'm Ryan Cooper. Melissa and I have been married for 4 years. We live at 642 Oakwood Drive." James shook his head, his expression hardening. "No, I'm James Cooper. Melissa and I have been married for 3 years. We live at 1580 Riverdale Avenue." The two addresses were on opposite sides of the city. Before either of us could say more, a doctor emerged from treatment room 3. "Family of Melissa Cooper?" she asked, then paused at the obvious tension in the hallway. "I'm her husband," we both said at once. The doctor glanced between us, professional composure masking what must have been considerable confusion. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Mrs. Cooper is stable, minor concussion, bruised ribs, and a sprained wrist. She's resting comfortably." "I want to see my wife," James demanded. "My wife," I corrected, anger beginning to displace shock. The doctor raised her hands in a calming gesture. "Gentlemen, please. This situation clearly requires some clarification, but my immediate concern is my patient's well-being. A hospital corridor isn't the place for this conversation." She led us to a small consultation room, the kind typically used for delivering bad news to families. It felt appropriate. Whatever was happening, someone was about to receive life-altering information. Once the door closed behind us, James turned to me. "Who exactly are you, and why are you claiming to be married to my wife?" "I could ask you the same question," I countered, struggling to maintain composure. "I'm Ryan Cooper. Melissa and I met 5 years ago at Baker & Associates, where we both work. We were married 4 years ago at the Lakeside Gardens venue. Our anniversary is October 12th. James paled slightly, but maintained his confrontational stance. "I'm James Cooper. Melissa and I met at a charity fundraiser 4 years ago. We were married 3 years ago at City Hall. Our anniversary is June 8th. Each of us pulled out our phones, showing the other photos of ourselves with the same woman, my wife, his wife, at different events in different settings, living evidently different lives. "This is impossible," I muttered, scrolling through James's photos. There was Melissa, unmistakably the woman I'd shared my life with for 5 years, looking equally comfortable and intimate with this stranger. "Driver's licenses," James suggested suddenly. "Let's see them." We each produced our identification, both legitimate, both listing different addresses. I also pulled out my wallet to show our wedding photo, the small worn picture I'd carried since our marriage. That's not our wedding, James said, staring at the image of Melissa in a traditional white gown beside me. He showed me his phone again, scrolling to a photo of himself with Melissa at what appeared to be a courthouse ceremony, her in a simple blue dress, both smiling broadly at the camera. This has to be some kind of elaborate hoax, I said, though I was struggling to imagine any explanation that could account for the evidence before us. Or she has an identical twin she never mentioned. No twin, James replied, his voice hollow. Only child, parents deceased, the same background Melissa had shared with me. The doctor, who had been observing our exchange with professional neutrality, finally spoke. Gentlemen, while I can't comment on the personal situation unfolding here, I do need to make a decision about who can see Mrs. Cooper. Her medical condition, while not severe, does warrant careful management of stress and emotional disturbance. Her phone, I suggested, grasping for concrete evidence. Her phone will have both our numbers, texts, call history. That should clarify things. The doctor nodded. Mrs. Cooper's personal effects are secured in the room. Perhaps one of you could check her phone while the other speaks with her. That might provide some clarity without immediately confronting her with this situation. After brief negotiation, it was decided that James would check the phone while I spoke with Melissa, as she had apparently been asking for James when admitted, suggesting she might be confused if he appeared instead. As I entered treatment room 3, my heart pounded with such intensity I felt lightheaded. Melissa lay in the hospital bed, a bandage on her forehead, her wrist wrapped in a brace. Despite these minor injuries, she looked like the same woman I'd kissed goodbye that morning, the woman who'd reminded me to pick up dry cleaning on my way home, who'd teased me about forgetting our dinner plans with friends this weekend. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached, and for one hopeful moment, I thought everything might have been some absurd misunderstanding. Then confusion clouded her features. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice raspy but alert. "Where's James?" The world seemed to tilt beneath me, the floor suddenly unstable. "Melissa," I managed, "it's me, Ryan, your husband." She frowned, wincing slightly at the movement. "I don't know any Ryan. My husband's name is James. Where is he? Did something happen to him?" Before I could respond, the door opened and a nurse entered, followed by the doctor. "Mrs. Cooper, how are you feeling?" the doctor asked, moving to check the monitors beside the bed. "Confused," Melissa replied. "This man says he's my husband, but I don't know him. Where's James? Is he okay?" The doctor exchanged a glance with me before addressing Melissa. "James is fine. He's here at the hospital, but you've had a concussion, and that can sometimes cause confusion." "I'm not confused about who my husband is," Melissa insisted, becoming agitated. "James Cooper. We live on Riverdale Avenue. We have a gray cat named Pepper." Each word felt like a physical blow. Melissa and I lived on Oakwood Drive. We had no pets because of my allergies, a fact we discussed extensively before marriage. "Mrs. Cooper," the doctor said gently, "I'm going to ask you a few questions to assess your cognitive state. Can you tell me your full name and date of birth?" "Melissa Ann Cooper, born May 17, 1994, she responded promptly, correctly from my perspective. "And what day is it today?" "Tuesday, March 15th, again correct." "What's the last thing you remember before the accident?" Melissa's brow furrowed. "I was driving back from my mother-in-law's house in Westbrook. She'd given me some plans for our apartment. I was at the intersection of Main and Elm when someone ran the red light." Another shock. Melissa's parents were both deceased, and she had no in-laws in Westbrook or anywhere else. We lived in a house, not an apartment. And the accident, according to the call I'd received, had occurred on the east side of the city, nowhere near Main and Elm. The doctor continued with several more orientation questions, all of which Melissa answered coherently but with details from a life I knew nothing about, a life apparently shared with James Cooper, not me. When the doctor finished, she gestured for me to join her in the hallway. Outside the room, James was waiting, Melissa's phone in his hand, his expression a mixture of confusion and anger. "Her phone has both our numbers," he said without preamble. 2 separate text threads, different conversations running simultaneously, photos with both of us in different places. He held up the device, showing me the evidence. "She's been living 2 completely separate lives." The doctor, maintaining remarkable composure given the bizarre situation, suggested we all speak with the hospital social worker who might help navigate this unprecedented circumstance. James and I agreed, both seemingly grateful for any professional guidance in territory neither of us had imagined existing, let alone traversing. Left alone momentarily while the doctor arranged this consultation, James and I stood in uncomfortable silence, two strangers connected by marriage to the same woman, a woman who, it appeared, had constructed two entirely separate lives without either of us knowing about the other. "How is this even possible?" I finally asked, the question directed as much to myself as to James. How could she maintain two completely separate existences without either of us noticing? James shook his head, staring at the floor. "I travel for work, 3 days a week, every week, always the same days, Monday through Wednesday. I'm a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company." The pieces began falling into horrible place. "I work rotating shifts at the hospital," I said slowly. 3 12-hour night shifts, Thursday through Saturday, sleep most of Sunday. Been on that schedule for years. Our non-overlapping schedules created perfect opportunity for Melissa to live what appeared to be two full-time marriages with neither husband aware of the other. The logistical complexity was staggering. 2 homes, 2 sets of friends and social obligations, 2 entirely separate lives maintained without slippage for years. As we waited for the social worker, I scrolled through photos on my phone, images of the life I thought I knew with absolute certainty. Melissa and I on vacation in Mexico last year. Melissa at my sister's wedding. Melissa cooking in our kitchen on Oakwood Drive. Each memory now called into question, each moment potentially containing hidden dimensions I couldn't begin to comprehend. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with for 5 years was, apparently, a stranger, and I had no idea what to do next. The hospital social worker, Ms. Patel, met with us in a private consultation room, her professional demeanor providing small comfort in a situation that had spiraled beyond any conventional crisis management approach. "I understand we have an unusual circumstance," she began, masterful understatement reflecting either extensive professional experience or remarkable adaptability. "Before we proceed, I want to confirm that Mrs. Cooper's medical condition is stable and not our primary concern at this moment. The immediate question involves how to proceed with this complex personal situation." James and I nodded in uncomfortable unison, temporary alignment in our shared disorientation. "I've spoken with Dr. Reyes," Ms. Patel continued. "Given Mrs. Cooper's concussion, immediate confrontation about this situation could potentially cause additional stress that might complicate her recovery. However, maintaining what appears to be a significant deception also raises ethical concerns." "I want answers," James stated flatly. "I want to talk to my wife, or whoever she actually is, and understand what's been happening." "So do I agreed, finding common ground with this stranger who was, somehow, also my wife's husband. "But I don't want to harm her recovery." Ms. Patel nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps a measured approach would be best. Mrs. Cooper currently recognizes Mr. James Cooper as her husband and appears confused by Mr. Ryan Cooper's presence. For her immediate medical well-being, it might be best to maintain this recognition pattern while she recovers from the concussion, then address the larger situation when she's medically stable." The suggestion made logical sense despite its emotional difficulty. James would be allowed to see Melissa as her recognized husband, while I would temporarily step back, waiting until her medical condition stabilized before confronting the extraordinary deception that had apparently defined our marriage. "And in the meantime?" I asked, struggling to imagine navigating the coming hours and days with this new, impossible knowledge. "In the meantime," Ms. Patel replied carefully, "I would suggest that both of you might want to do some investigation into your respective situations. Check financial records, speak with friends who know your wife, perhaps consult legal counsel about potential implications." The recommendation highlighted uncomfortable reality. Beyond the immediate emotional devastation lay practical considerations neither of us had begun to process. Legal marriage status, financial entanglements, potential criminal implications of what appeared to be intentional fraud or bigamy, layers of complexity extending far beyond the personal betrayal currently dominating our emotional landscapes. As James prepared to see Melissa again, now officially recognized by hospital staff as her identified husband, he paused, turning to me with expression containing mixture of anger, confusion, and reluctant solidarity. "When she's released," he said, "we both deserve answers. Together. I don't want her spinning separate stories to each of us." I nodded, exchanging phone numbers with this man who was, somehow, both stranger and the person who might best understand my current reality. "I'll check our house, my house, for evidence, see what I can find out." With that tenuous plan established, I left the hospital in state of functioning shock, driving home on autopilot while my mind frantically cataloged questions without answers. How long had this deception continued? Were there others besides James and me? Was anything in our relationship real, or had every moment been performance with an elaborate fraud? The house on Oakwood Drive, the home I had shared with Melissa for 4 years, felt simultaneously familiar and alien as I entered. Every photograph, every item of furniture, every domestic detail now contained potential hidden meaning or purpose I couldn't begin to unravel. I began methodical search for evidence, feeling like intruder in my own home despite legal and moral right to investigate what appeared to be extraordinary deception. Melissa's home office seemed logical starting point, the space where she managed household accounts, correspondence, and personal records. The initial search revealed nothing unusual: organized files containing expected documents, normal correspondence, typical household management systems. Then I noticed slight gap behind filing cabinet, small space between furniture and wall that wouldn't normally warrant attention. Moving the cabinet revealed wall safe I had never known existed, installed behind decorative wall hanging. Melissa had insisted on positioning at that exact location when we moved in. The discovery sent chill through me, physical evidence of deliberate concealment beyond even the elaborate life compartmentalization I had begun imagining. Without combination, the safe remained inaccessible, immediate mystery, but its existence confirmed intentional secrecy beyond what might be explained by confusion, misunderstanding, or medical condition. This was deliberate, planned, sustained deception of extraordinary complexity. My search continued with increasing urgency, extending into closets, storage spaces, and areas I had never had reason to examine closely. In guest room closet, behind winter coats rarely accessed in our moderate climate, I discovered locked suitcase hidden beneath old comforter. Unlike safe, this security proved manageable. Small luggage lock yielded to determined manipulation, revealing contents that transformed theoretical understanding of betrayal into tangible evidence impossible to deny or rationalize. The suitcase contained comprehensive documentation of Melissa's other life. Photos of her with James in locations I didn't recognize, celebrating events I hadn't shared, financial records for accounts I had no knowledge of, property documentation for the Riverdale Avenue address James had mentioned, even second cell phone with separate charger, presumably maintained for communication within that parallel existence. Most disturbing were personal items that suggested intimate connection rather than merely practical arrangement. Anniversary cards exchanged between Melissa and James expressing genuine-seeming affection. Small gifts with attached notes referencing private jokes and shared experiences. Even journal containing entries discussing feelings for James alongside practical logistics of maintaining separate lives. One entry particularly shattered any lingering hope that this situation might have innocent or at least emotionally understandable explanation. 3 years married to Jay today. Sometimes I wonder if this dual life is sustainable long-term, but the separation systems have worked well so far. R remains completely unaware, as does Jay. The schedule alignment continues to provide perfect coverage. Neither has reason to suspect anything beyond occasional work commitments during their off days. The emotional compartmentalization has become almost second nature now. Sometimes I even forget myself which life I'm currently inhabiting until I check my location and schedule. The clinical detachment, the calculated assessment of separation systems, and emotional compartmentalization revealed level of premeditation and sustained deception beyond anything I had begun to imagine. This wasn't momentary weakness or relationship confusion, but years-long construction of parallel lives maintained through deliberate, continuous choices. I photographed everything, documentation evidence for conversation that would inevitably follow Melissa's hospital release. The process felt surreal, cataloging proof of my wife's elaborate deception like detective building case rather than husband discovering betrayal. As I carefully returned items to their hiding places, instinctive preservation of evidence sources rather than confrontation preparation, my phone buzzed with text from James. "She's being discharged tomorrow morning. Doctor says concussion symptoms improving, no reason to keep her. We need to decide what happens next. Can you meet tonight?" The message created immediate practical dilemma. Which home would Melissa return to upon discharge? Which life would she resume? And how would the inevitable confrontation occur? These questions required coordination with James, who, despite being source of massive disruption to my understanding of reality, was also only person who fully comprehended unique position we both occupied. We arranged to meet at neutral location, 24-hour diner near hospital where neither was likely to encounter acquaintances during late-night conversation. The setting's banality contrasted absurdly with extraordinary circumstances, fluorescent lighting and laminated menus providing mundane backdrop for discussion of life-shattering deception. James arrived first, already nursing coffee cup with expression suggesting sleepless contemplation matching my own fragmented attempts at processing impossible situation. We acknowledged each other with awkward nods, neither certain of appropriate protocol for our unprecedented relationship status. "I found evidence," I began without preamble once seated across from him. "Hidden safe behind filing cabinet, locked suitcase in guest room closet containing documentation of her other life. Journal entries explicitly discussing maintaining dual identities." James nodded grimly. "I went to our apartment after leaving the hospital, found similar hiding spots, hollow space behind bathroom ventilation panel containing second phone, financial documents for accounts I didn't know about, even separate passport with her photo, but different middle name." The parallel discoveries confirmed suspicion that had been forming since our hospital encounter. This deception hadn't been improvised response to unexpected circumstance, but elaborately constructed system maintained through meticulous planning and execution. "How did we not see it?" I asked, question directed as much at myself as at James. "How could someone maintain two complete lives without either of us noticing anything wrong?" "Our schedules," James replied, repeating observation we'd made earlier. "I'm gone consistently Monday through Wednesday. You work night shifts Thursday through Saturday. That creates perfect coverage with no overlap. She always told me she worked from home those days I was traveling, needed quiet space for concentration. She told me her marketing job required occasional weekend client meetings," I added, recalling explanations that had seemed reasonable at the time. Maybe once or twice a month she'd be gone Saturday during my sleep cycle or Sunday when I was recovering from night shifts. As we compared notes, pattern emerged with disturbing clarity. Melissa had constructed elaborate system using our non-overlapping schedules as foundation, then built upon that framework with carefully managed explanations for any schedule anomalies that might create questions or suspicion. "What do we do now?" James asked after server refilled our untouched coffee cups. "When she's discharged tomorrow, where does she go? Which life does she return to?" The question highlighted practical dimension extending beyond emotional betrayal. Melissa currently recognized James as her husband, expressing confusion when encountering me. Medical recommendations suggested maintaining this recognition pattern until concussion symptoms resolved. Yet allowing her to simply resume one of her dual lives without addressing deception seemed both practically untenable and emotionally devastating. "I think we need to confront her together," I suggested after careful consideration. "Not immediately upon discharge. That seems potentially harmful given her concussion. But once she's settled somewhere, both of us need to be present for conversation so she can't create separate narratives for each of us." James nodded slowly. "She should come to the Riverdale apartment since that's where she thinks she lives right now. Give her day to rest, then we both talk to her tomorrow evening? By then, the immediate medical concerns should be less pressing. The plan made logical sense despite its emotional difficulty, allowing Melissa to return to environment she currently recognized while creating timeline for confrontation that balanced medical considerations against our legitimate need for answers and resolution. There's one more thing, I added hesitantly. We should check marriage records, determine which marriage is legally valid, or if somehow both are. The question had been forming since our initial discovery. Was one of us legally married while the other existed in relationship without legal standing? Or had Melissa somehow navigated legal system to create dual marriages? James grimaced, the suggestion apparently triggering similar concerns he had been considering. I'll contact my lawyer in the morning, see what she recommends. This situation must have legal implications beyond just the personal betrayal. With tentative plan established, we exchanged additional contact information and departed, two strangers connected by extraordinary circumstance, temporarily aligned despite fundamental disruption each had inadvertently caused in the other's life. I returned to the house on Oakwood Drive, home that now felt like elaborate stage set rather than genuine dwelling, and spent sleepless night alternating between examining evidence of Melissa's deception and attempting to reconstruct understanding of reality that could accommodate discovered truth. The following day passed in fog of practical arrangements and emotional turbulence. Text from James confirmed Melissa had been discharged and brought to Riverdale apartment, still apparently recognizing only him as husband, while maintaining confusion about my identity. Her concussion symptoms had improved but not resolved entirely, medical follow-up scheduled for coming days. Meanwhile, preliminary legal inquiry revealed what we had begun to suspect. Only one marriage could be legally valid. Record search showed Melissa had married me first, making union with James potentially bigamous and legally void depending on jurisdiction specifics and intent considerations. This information added additional dimension to already complex situation, not just emotional betrayal, but potential criminal liability and legal complications extending beyond relationship dissolution. By evening, arrangements were finalized for confrontation neither of us wanted but both required. James would inform Melissa that colleague needed to discuss important matter with them, providing cover for my arrival without triggering immediate distress that might complicate her medical recovery. Once present, we would jointly present discovered evidence and seek explanation for extraordinary deception that had defined our marriages. The Riverdale Avenue apartment building appeared ordinary from outside, mid-range complex indistinguishable from countless similar developments throughout city. Yet entering lobby created immediate disorientation, experiencing environment that represented complete parallel life for woman I had believed I knew intimately. James met me near elevator, expression suggesting emotional state matching my own, mixture of dread, anger, confusion, and desperate need for explanations that might make sense of unprecedented situation. She's resting in living room, he said quietly as we approached apartment door. Still has headache and some confusion, but significantly improved since yesterday. I haven't said anything about any of this. I nodded, steeling myself for encounter that would irrevocably alter whatever remained of life I had believed was mine. As James unlocked door, I took deep breath and stepped into physical manifestation of my wife's second existence. The apartment reflected Melissa I knew while containing unfamiliar elements. Similar decorating style but different furniture, recognizable preferences expressed through alternative selections. Photos displayed throughout space showed her with James in locations and at events I had never experienced. Parallel celebration of life milestones, holidays, and ordinary moments mirroring those captured in our home on Oakwood Drive. Melissa looked up as we entered, smiling at James before noticing me behind him. Confusion immediately crossed her features, followed by visible discomfort. "James? Why is he here?" she asked, tension evident in her voice. "The man from the hospital who claimed to know me?" "He doesn't just claim to know you, Melissa," James replied carefully, closing door behind us. "He's your husband, one of them, at least." Her expression shifted rapidly through confusion, alarm, and something that might have been recognition before settling into careful neutrality that seemed practiced rather than natural. "I don't understand," she said, voice steady despite situation's obvious stress. "I have concussion. The doctor said confusion is normal, but I know who my husband is." "You know both your husbands," I interjected, maintaining distance to avoid appearing threatening while ensuring I remained part of conversation. "Me, Ryan Cooper, who you married 4 years ago and live with on Oakwood Drive, and James Cooper, who you apparently married 3 years ago and live with here on Riverdale Avenue." Her gaze darted between us, calculation visible beneath surface confusion. Without speaking, James removed envelope from his pocket, emptying contents onto coffee table separating us, photos and documents we had each discovered in our respective homes, evidence of dual lives too comprehensive for simple denial. "We know, Melissa," he said simply. "We've both found evidence of your double life. The hidden phones, the secret documents, the journal entries explicitly discussing how you've maintained 2 separate marriages for years. The only question remaining," I added, "is why, and how you possibly thought this could continue indefinitely without discovery." For several moments, Melissa remained silent, gaze fixed on evidence scattered across table. When she finally looked up, her expression had transformed. Confusion replaced by composed resignation, suggesting aftermath of long-anticipated disclosure rather than shocking accusation. "I suppose concurrent schedules couldn't align perfectly forever," she said with surprising calmness. "The accident was unfortunate timing. Without hospital admission requiring emergency contacts, this particular intersection might have been avoided for quite some time longer." The response, analytical assessment rather than emotional reaction, confirmed what documentary evidence had suggested. This wasn't impulsive behavior or temporary lapse, but calculated, sustained construction of parallel lives maintained through extraordinary compartmentalization and deception. "That's your response?" James demanded, anger breaking through careful composure. "Schedule analysis? We deserve actual answers, Melissa. Both of us do." She nodded slowly, wincing slightly at the movement, reminder of injuries that complicated already unprecedented situation. "You're right, you both deserve explanation, though I'm not certain either of you will find it satisfying. The simple truth is that I couldn't choose, so I chose both." The admission, delivered with disturbing matter-of-factness, initiated conversation unlike any I could have imagined participating in, detailed explanation of how my wife had systematically constructed and maintained dual marriages for years without either husband suspecting existence of the other. "It started unintentionally," Melissa began, her composure unsettling given the circumstances. "I met Ryan first, at Baker & Associates. We started dating, fell in love, got married. It was genuine, all of it." I shifted uncomfortably, the validation offering little comfort given what had followed. "Then I met James at that charity fundraiser," she continued. "I wasn't looking for another relationship, it just happened. The connection was immediate and intense, different from what I had with Ryan, but equally powerful." "So you decided to marry him while already married to me?" I interjected, unable to maintain neutral listening stance despite our agreement to let her explain before responding. Melissa looked directly at me for the first time since the conversation began. "I know it sounds indefensible. It was never planned. James and I dated for several months. By the time marriage came up, I felt trapped, completely in love with 2 different men, unable to choose without devastating myself and someone else." "Most people manage to make that choice," James noted dryly. "It's called being an adult." "You're right," she acknowledged. "But I couldn't. The idea of losing either of you was unbearable. Then I realized your schedules created perfect non-overlap, Ryan working night shifts Thursday through Saturday, James traveling Monday through Wednesday. It seemed almost like cosmic permission for unconventional solution." The characterization, framing extraordinary deception as mere unconventionality, highlighted disturbing perspective underlying Melissa's actions. This wasn't momentary weakness or emotional confusion, but fundamental rejection of basic relationship ethics recast as innovative problem-solving. "That's not a solution," I objected. "That's systematic deception. You constructed elaborate lies, created hidden documentation, maintained parallel lives while denying both of us informed consent about our own marriages. I know how it sounds, she replied, hint of defensiveness entering previously composed demeanor. But both relationships were genuine. I compartmentalized the practical details, not the emotional connection. I love both of you, just in different ways. Love includes honesty, James said quietly. Whatever you felt for either of us, it couldn't have been love if it required this level of deception to maintain. Melissa's expression suggested this perspective hadn't occurred to her, as if redefining love to accommodate extraordinary compartmentalization had seemed reasonable adjustment rather than fundamental contradiction. The logistics, I prompted, needing to understand practical mechanics beyond psychological justifications. How did you manage 2 complete lives without either of us noticing inconsistencies? Systems, she replied, slipping into analytical mode that suggested practiced consideration of these details. Separate phones with different notification settings depending on location. Calendar management with color coding and multiple verification points to prevent scheduling conflicts. Financial separation through accounts each of you knew about, plus additional accounts neither of you was aware of. The methodical explanation revealed disturbing level of premeditation, not impulsive behavior, but carefully constructed architecture of deception maintained through daily attention to increasingly complex systems. What about friends, family? James asked. Surely people knew both of us. Careful social separation, Melissa explained. Different friend groups with minimal overlap potential, limited family involvement since my parents passed away and neither of you has extensive family nearby. When absolutely necessary, I described each of you as close friend to people in the other life. Each detail confirmed what evidence had suggested. Extraordinary effort dedicated to maintaining elaborate deception rather than dealing honestly with emotional complexity. The calculated nature of these arrangements contradicted any suggestion of momentary weakness or confusion, revealing instead sustained commitment to maintaining dual lives regardless of ethical implications. Were there others? I asked, question that had been haunting me since initial discovery. Beyond the 2 of us? No, Melissa insisted, seemingly offended by suggestion. Just you 2. This wasn't about collecting relationships or whatever you're imagining. It was about loving 2 different people and not being able to choose between those specific connections. The distinction offered little comfort. Unique victimhood providing no advantage over being among multiple deceived partners. The fundamental betrayal remained unchanged regardless of exclusivity. The legal implications, James noted, returning to practical concerns we had discussed previously. Did you realize you were committing bigamy, that our marriage isn't legally valid? Melissa's expression suggested this particular detail had indeed received consideration. I understood the technical legal situation, yes, but I regarded both relationships as equally valid commitments regardless of legal technicalities. That wasn't your decision to make unilaterally, I pointed out. James deserved to know his marriage lacked legal standing. I deserved to know you had made identical commitments to someone else. We both deserved basic information about our own lives. I know, she acknowledged, first genuine regret entering her expression. The longer it continued, the more impossible disclosure became. Initially, I told myself it was temporary arrangement until I could figure things out. Then months became years, and the separate lives became increasingly established and intertwined. And what was your long-term plan? James asked, question cutting to heart of situation's fundamental irrationality. This couldn't continue indefinitely. What happened when one of us wanted children, or needed to relocate for work, or simply experienced schedule change that disrupted your careful separation system? I didn't have long-term plan, Melissa admitted, momentary vulnerability breaking through composed exterior. Each time those questions arose, I found immediate solutions rather than addressing fundamental unsustainability. When Ryan mentioned children last year, I deflected with career timing concerns. When you discussed potential relocation, I negotiated remote work possibility. The revelation highlighted perhaps most disturbing aspect of the situation. Not just execution of elaborate deception, but apparent belief that such arrangement could somehow continue indefinitely through increasing layers of manipulation and compartmentalization. "What happens now?" I asked, question directed partly at Melissa but equally at situation itself. "This can't continue, that much is obvious." "No, it can't," she agreed quietly. "The careful separation has collapsed completely. There's no rebuilding that particular structure." Her phrasing, clinical assessment of failed system rather than emotional reckoning with relationship devastation, reinforced disturbing detachment underlying years of deception. This wasn't normal relationship betrayal, but fundamentally different approach to human connection that neither James nor I had recognized in woman we had married. "You need to make choice you've been avoiding for years," James stated flatly. "Though I'm not certain either of us would want to continue relationship built on such profound deception, regardless of your decision." Melissa looked between us, genuine distress finally visible beneath composed exterior. "I understand you're both angry. You have every right to be. But what I had with each of you, wasn't fake. The compartmentalization was practical necessity, not emotional pretense." "That distinction means nothing," I replied, struggling to maintain calm while addressing such fundamental disconnection from basic relationship ethics. Relationships require informed consent. We both made life decisions based on fundamentally false understanding of our marriages. Whether you compartmentalized emotions is irrelevant compared to systematic deception about basic facts of our shared lives. The conversation continued for hours, cycling through practical details, emotional impacts, and increasingly futile attempts to establish shared reality between three people with fundamentally different understanding of events. Melissa provided additional information about mechanics of her deception, separate credit cards, carefully managed schedules, strategic explanations for any anomalies that might have triggered suspicion, while James and I attempted to process implications for our past, present, and future. By early morning, physical and emotional exhaustion had replaced initial shock and anger, leaving three people connected by extraordinary circumstance without clear path forward. Medical considerations remained relevant, Melissa still recovering from concussion, her health requiring some stability despite relationship chaos surrounding her. Practical matters required immediate attention, living arrangements, financial disentanglement, legal implications of bigamous marriage. "I'll stay with my brother for now," I finally said, needing distance from both locations now contaminated by knowledge of elaborate deception. "James is legally established here since this is addressed on his documentation. Melissa should remain where medical providers expect her to be while recovering from concussion." James nodded agreement, temporary practical arrangement addressing immediate needs without resolving underlying situation. "We should all consult individual legal counsel," he added. "Beyond emotional considerations, this situation has potential legal complications none of us fully understands yet." Melissa, exhaustion finally breaking through composed facade she had maintained through most of confrontation, nodded without offering alternative suggestions. The woman who had maintained extraordinary control over dual lives for years now seemed almost passive, as if collapse of carefully constructed reality had removed foundation for decision-making capacity that had previously driven her actions. As I prepared to leave apartment that represented physical manifestation of my wife's secret life, fundamental question remained unasked because answer seemed increasingly irrelevant. Whether love Melissa claimed to feel for both of us had ever been genuine, or whether capacity for compartmentalization extended to emotional experience itself, creating performance so convincing it had deceived performer alongside audience. The hospital mix-up that had revealed extraordinary deception had irrevocably altered three lives, collapsing elaborate fiction maintained through years of calculated choices and systematic manipulation. Whatever came next would emerge from wreckage of that collapsed structure, building upon foundation of painful truth, rather than carefully constructed illusion none of us had recognized until forces beyond our control revealed reality we had never suspected existing. The weeks following discovery passed in blur of practical arrangements and emotional processing unlike anything I could have anticipated experiencing. My brother's spare room became temporary sanctuary, neutral space containing no reminders of relationship now revealed as partially fictional. Legal consultation provided framework for addressing practical implications of Melissa's deception, confirmation that my marriage held legal standing, while James occupied more complicated position of being unwitting participant in bigamous union. Financial investigation revealed extent of Melissa's compartmentalization, separate accounts beyond those either James or I had known about, carefully managed resources supporting dual households without triggering suspicion from either husband. The systematic nature of these arrangements confirmed what confrontation had suggested: extraordinary effort dedicated to maintaining deception rather than addressing fundamental ethical problems inherent in situation. Most challenging aspect involved navigating emotional aftermath of discovering fundamental betrayal within relationship I had believed represented core stability in my life. Traditional betrayal narratives, infidelity, financial deception, hidden addiction, at least occur within shared reality, where relationship itself exists, as both partners understand it. Melissa's deception invalidated basic premise of our connection, revealing marriage I had fully inhabited existed alongside parallel relationship I had never suspected. The most disorienting aspect isn't just the betrayal itself, I explained during therapy session 3 weeks after discovery. It's the retroactive questioning of reality. Every memory, every seemingly genuine moment now contains potential hidden dimension I can't access or evaluate. Did she come home from spending time with him? Was she thinking about him during conversations with me? Was anything in our relationship authentically as I experienced it? This fundamental reality disruption created unique form of betrayal trauma, requiring specialized therapeutic approach. Traditional infidelity recovery frameworks proved insufficient for addressing situation where betrayal extended beyond specific actions to encompass basic relationship definition and structure. Meanwhile, practical matters demanded attention regardless of emotional processing timeline. The house on Oakwood Drive, home I had shared with Melissa for 4 years, required immediate decisions about continued ownership, occupancy, and potential sale. Financial entanglements needed resolution despite emotional ambiguity surrounding their creation. Legal implications of bigamous marriage demanded attention beyond personal relationship considerations. Through mutual attorney communications, James and I established limited coordination necessary for addressing practical matters while maintaining appropriate boundaries given unprecedented circumstances connecting us. Neither adversaries nor allies exactly, we occupied unique relationship category created by shared experience as victims of same extraordinary deception. 6 weeks after discovery, unexpected development further complicated already unprecedented situation. James contacted me directly rather than through legal representatives, requesting in-person meeting at neutral location to discuss matter he preferred not to communicate through intermediaries. The coffee shop where we met provided anonymous backdrop for conversation between two people whose connection defied conventional relationship categories. After brief, awkward greetings, James placed folder on table between us. "My attorney received these yesterday," he explained, opening folder to reveal photographs I didn't initially recognize. "They're from private investigator hired by Melissa's former employer investigating potential corporate espionage involving client information." The unexpected direction momentarily disoriented me. "What does this have to do with our situation?" "Everything, potentially," James replied, turning photographs toward me. These show Melissa meeting with individuals identified as representatives of competing firms in 3 different cities. Meetings occurred during business trips neither of us knew about, likely explained to each of us as time spent with the other. The revelation suggested additional layer beyond dual marriages, third compartment containing activities neither James nor I had been aware of, potentially extending deception beyond personal relationships into professional realm with legal implications exceeding even bigamy concerns. "There's more," James continued, visibly uncomfortable. "The investigator identified another residence, condominium in Lakeside District, purchased 2 years ago under LLC name neither of us was aware of. According to surveillance, Melissa spent significant time there when supposedly with either of us. Each new detail expanded scope of deception beyond what I had begun processing, suggesting compartmentalization extending far beyond dual marriages into territory I couldn't begin to comprehend. Not just two husbands unaware of each other, but entire life segments neither of us had glimpsed despite believing we shared complete lives with the same woman. "Have you confronted her with this information?" I asked, struggling to integrate these new revelations into already destabilized understanding of reality. James shook his head. "Not yet. After consulting with my attorney, I wanted to speak with you first. Whatever Melissa's professional activities involved, they create potential legal exposure that might affect both of us depending on financial connections and household knowledge implications." The concern was legitimate. Corporate espionage allegations could create legal complications extending beyond Melissa herself to households and partners potentially benefiting from activities neither of us had known about. The suggestion that we might face investigation or liability for actions we had been completely unaware of represented another layer of victimization beyond relationship deception. "We need coordinated legal response," I acknowledged, momentarily aligned with James through shared vulnerability despite fundamental strangeness of our connection, and complete understanding of what actually happened beyond just the personal deception. 2 days later, under guidance from respective legal counsel, James and I participated in formal interview with Melissa, circumstances requiring structured approach, unlike emotional confrontation following initial discovery. The meeting occurred at neutral location, conference room at James's attorney's office, with legal representatives present for all parties. Melissa, now fully recovered from concussion that had triggered initial discovery, presented composed exterior suggesting psychological compartmentalization remained intact despite collapse of practical separation between her dual lives. When presented with evidence of third residence and corporate meetings, her expression registered brief surprise, followed by resignation rather than shock or denial. "I had hoped those particular activities wouldn't become relevant to our current situation," she said after reviewing photographs, statement confirming rather than denying additional deception layer. "They represent separate professional arrangements unrelated to personal relationships with either of you." "Separate arrangements meaning corporate espionage?" James's attorney asked directly, professional detachment allowing question neither James nor I could articulate through growing shock. "Industrial intelligence consulting," Melissa corrected, distinction without meaningful difference suggesting same reality reframing that had characterized her description of dual marriages as unconventional arrangement rather than systematic deception. Several firms in the sector engage similar services for competitive analysis. The explanation, corporate espionage recast as legitimate business practice through terminology adjustment, echoed pattern established in personal deception, suggesting fundamental perspective allowing Melissa to reconstruct ethical boundaries through linguistic and conceptual compartmentalization alongside practical separation systems. "Were either of us ever present at Lakeside Condominium?" I asked, needing to establish clear boundaries between manipulated knowledge and completely hidden information. "No," Melissa replied without hesitation. "That location was maintained specifically for professional activities separate from either personal relationship. Neither of you visited or knew about its existence." The confirmation provided small comfort. At least some experiences remained genuinely as I had understood them, without hidden dimension or audience I had never suspected. Yet distinction between known deception and unknown compartments offered little meaningful consolation when basic trust had been so fundamentally violated across multiple life domains. The revelation of professional deception alongside personal duplicity created additional legal complexities, requiring extensive consultation with attorneys specializing in corporate law alongside family court representatives already involved in addressing marital implications. Though neither James nor I appeared directly implicated in Melissa's corporate activities, financial connections through shared households created potential exposure, requiring careful documentation and proactive disclosure to relevant authorities. 3 months after initial discovery, legal proceedings had established preliminary frameworks for addressing multiple dimensions of Melissa's deception. My marriage, being legally valid, required formal dissolution through divorce process, while James's union, technically void due to bigamous nature, still required legal unwinding of practical entanglements established during relationship. Corporate implications remained under investigation, both James and I cooperating with authorities while maintaining our position as unknowing victims rather than participants in activities we had never suspected. Throughout these proceedings, the most challenging aspect remained psychological rather than legal, reconstructing understanding of reality that could accommodate extraordinary deception without surrendering basic trust in my own perception and judgment. Therapy provided essential support for this process, though conventional therapeutic approaches required significant adaptation to address unprecedented situation. The fundamental question isn't why she did this, my therapist observed during sessions 6 months after discovery. That remains largely unknowable regardless of explanations Melissa provides. The relevant question is how you reconstruct understanding of relationships and trust that allows genuine connection without perpetual suspicion or hypervigilance. This framing, focusing on forward movement rather than complete understanding of motivations beyond my access, provided essential perspective for navigation process that might otherwise have become permanently fixed on unanswerable questions about Melissa's internal experience and decision-making processes. 8 months after discovery, practical matters had largely resolved into new arrangements reflecting post-deception reality. The house on Oakwood Drive had been sold, proceeds divided according to legal settlement acknowledging my primary claim while providing equitable distribution of jointly accumulated assets. James had established separate legal identity completely disentangled from relationship with Melissa, similar practical closure allowing independent rebuilding despite emotional process continuing on its own timeline. Melissa herself had relocated following resolution of corporate investigation, resulting in financial penalties but no criminal charges. Outcome suggesting professional compartmentalization had extended to careful legal boundary management alongside personal deception. Her occasional communications through legal representatives maintained composed, practical tone established during confrontation, never addressing emotional dimensions of extraordinary betrayal she had orchestrated and maintained for years. 1 year after hospital mix-up that revealed my wife's parallel marriage and compartmentalized existence, I had established new life framework significantly different from what I had imagined before discovery. New apartment in different city section provided physical separation from locations associated with relationship now understood as partially fictional. Career advancement following schedule change eliminated night shift pattern that had inadvertently facilitated Melissa's deception. Social connections included both maintained friendships from before discovery and new relationships established with complete awareness of extraordinary experience that had transformed my understanding of trust and intimacy. The most significant transformation involved relationship with trust itself, not categorical suspicion of all connections, but nuanced understanding of verification as component of healthy boundaries rather than indication of dysfunctional doubt. This perspective allowed gradual rebuilding of capacity for genuine connection without naive vulnerability that had characterized previous relationship approach. The experience hasn't made me unable to trust, I explained during final therapy sessions specifically addressing betrayal recovery. It's made me understand that trust operates on spectrum rather than binary state. Appropriate verification and boundary establishment represent healthy relationship components rather than inherent skepticism or connection failure. This evolved perspective, trust informed by experience rather than eliminated by betrayal, represented perhaps most important outcome from extraordinary deception discovery. Not because betrayal itself offered benefit, but because recovery process revealed understanding previously obscured by unconsidered assumptions about relationship functioning and communication. 18 months after discovery, unexpected encounter provided opportunity for perspective assessment measuring actual healing against theoretical recovery frameworks. While attending professional conference in neighboring city, I encountered James in hotel lobby. Random intersection neither could have anticipated given our generally separate life spheres despite unusual connection. After initial awkward recognition, we found ourselves sharing dinner at hotel restaurant, Unique shared experience creating conversation opportunity. Impossible with anyone lacking direct understanding of extraordinary situation we had both navigated. "Do you ever hear from her?" James asked after preliminary conversation establishing our respective life developments since legal proceedings had concluded. "No," I replied. "Final communication came through attorneys after settlement completion. Nothing since then." He nodded, similar experience apparently matching my own. "Do you think she had some psychological condition that explains what happened?" My therapist suggested possible dissociative disorder or extreme compartmentalization capacity beyond normal psychological functioning. The question echoed considerations I had explored extensively during my own recovery process, whether clinical explanation might provide framework for understanding behavior so far outside normal relationship functions that conventional betrayal narratives proved insufficient. "I've considered that possibility," I acknowledged, "but I've ultimately found clinical categorization less relevant than fundamental reality acceptance. Whatever internal experience allowed her actions, the external behavior remains the same. Systematic deception maintained through thousands of daily choices across years of supposed intimate connection." James nodded thoughtfully. "I've reached similar conclusion. Understanding exact psychological mechanism doesn't substantially change impact or necessary recovery process. The betrayal remains equally significant regardless of diagnostic classification." The observation highlighted perhaps most important insight emerging from extraordinary experience, that healing required integration of what had happened rather than complete explanation of why it had occurred. Some questions would remain perpetually unanswered, some motivations permanently inaccessible, yet life reconstruction could proceed successfully without artificial closure or comprehensive understanding of factors beyond my perception. 2 years after hospital mix-up revealed my wife maintained parallel marriage and compartmentalized existence, life had established new patterns reflecting post-betrayal reality integration rather than continued trauma response. The extraordinary deception had permanently altered my understanding of relationship dynamics, communication patterns, and trust development, not through categorical suspicion, but through more sophisticated appreciation for verification as component of genuine connection rather than inherent doubt indicator. The capacity to trust had not been eliminated but transformed, informed by experience rather than defined by betrayal, capable of authentic vulnerability without naive exposure, creating unnecessary risk. This evolved perspective represented not silver lining within inherently negative experience, but genuine growth emerging through necessity rather than preference, healing that acknowledged wound without allowing it to permanently determine future relationship capacity. The hospital mix-up that had inadvertently revealed extraordinary deception had irrevocably altered understanding of my past. Relationship I had fully inhabited, revealed as partially fictional creation maintained through elaborate compartmentalization beyond what I had believed possible within intimate connection. Yet that same revelation had ultimately created possibility for more authentic future relationships built upon realistic trust assessment, rather than unconsidered assumptions about communication and transparency within partnership. Not because betrayal itself offered inherent benefit, but because recovery process revealed understanding previously obscured by comfortable certainties that had proved less reliable than I had imagined. Before ordinary Tuesday afternoon, when nurse's casual comment collapsed elaborate fiction. I had never suspected existing within marriage. I had believed represented core stability in my life. TLDR. I rushed to the ER when my wife had a car accident, only to be confused when the staff referred to the other husband. It turned out my wife had been maintaining 2 completely separate marriages for years, one with me, working night shifts THUSAT, and another with a man named James, who traveled Monwed. When confronted, she calmly explained she couldn't choose between us, so she created elaborate systems to maintain both relationships without either of us knowing about the other. Later investigation revealed she even had a third secret life involving corporate espionage. 2 years later, I've rebuilt my life and learned that trust requires verification, not blind faith. Edit. To answer common questions. 1. Yes, we divorced. My marriage was legally valid since it came first. James's marriage was technically bigamous. 2. No, Melissa was never formally diagnosed with any psychological condition, though multiple therapists suggested extreme compartmentalization beyond normal functioning. 3. James and I occasionally keep in touch. We're not friends exactly, but no one else truly understands what we experienced. Update, 2 years later. Life has stabilized in ways I couldn't imagine during those first chaotic weeks. I've changed careers, moved to a new city, and even started dating again, with much more awareness about healthy relationship boundaries. The most surprising outcome is that this experience hasn't made me unable to trust. It's just made me understand that trust exists on a spectrum rather than as an all-or-nothing state. I've learned that appropriate verification is a normal part of healthy relationships, not a sign of dysfunction. While I would never wish this experience on anyone, I've built a life with more authentic connections than I had before.